Alright, so to me, the next logical step in the Star Wars marathon would be the Star Wars games. And before, just to get this out of the way right now, I am probably not going to talk about Knights of the Old Republic or any of those games because I never played them, and and I'm just talking about the ones that are most closely related to the films themselves. So that brings me to this particular Star Wars game that was released, I think, 2008, September 2008, called Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, and it's a it's kind of a it's kind of a standalone story with a completely new protagonist. Um, that supposedly takes place between episodes 3 and 4. That 20-year span between Revenge of the Sith and episode 4, the original Star Wars. Um, and the basic story of the game is that Darth Vader, during one of his missions to wipe out resistance on the Wookiee planet of whatever, he he comes across a Jedi Knight whom he then proceeds to kill. But little does he know that the Jedi Knight has a son who is very strong with the Force. So strong, in fact, that Darth Vader, after killing a group of Imperial witnesses, killing a group of his own officers who are about to kill this kid, he takes the kid as his apprentice, and basically spends the next decade or so training this guy to be essentially the most powerful ally that he could possibly have. And basically, he uses this guy who is simply known as the Apprentice, or his code name Star Killer, which is actually kind of a nice nod to the original scripting process for Star Wars, because originally Luke Skywalker was going to be, I think, Luke Star Killer, then Luke Sky Killer, then finally they arrived at Luke Skywalker. But this guy's code name is Star Killer, um, and he's basically used by Darth Vader to go on all these secret missions where he hunts down Jedi and eliminates important targets that Vader tells him to. And supposedly this will all lead to the ultimate goal of Vader and the Apprentice overthrowing the Emperor and basically ruling the galaxy together. So that's the basic premise, and obviously the plot evolves to to pit this guy against Darth Vader, because Darth Vader is a backstabbing despot, and also it kind of evolves to further include and explain some of the original trilogy characters, like Princess Leia and the Rebel Alliance. So that's the basic premise of the game, and basically what this game was marketed as was the first game, hence the title, the first game where you could truly wield the full power of the Force. Um, I mean, a big gimmick behind this game was the fact that the Force is literally unleashed. I mean, apparently, this game would have you believe that the Force was rather tame in the movies. Here, you can actually lift these big, huge objects. You can infuse your lightsaber with the Force lightning. You can do all these stuff that you would have never dreamed of them doing in the movies. I mean, it's a lot of these powers are really over the top. They are they are in most cases pretty overkill. When you're just tackling stormtroopers, but I digress. Um, so yeah, what this game had a fair amount of hype going for it. It was released on multiple consoles, and what I'm mainly going to talk about is the PS3 version. Um, and okay, in terms of the story, the game's story is actually okay. I mean, it's no Christopher Nolan story or anything like that, it does a decent job of explaining how the Rebel Alliance came into being. It does a decent job of varying up the environments. It does a decent job of kind of setting up this new character, Starkiller. Um, and yeah, I don't really have any serious qualms about the story, and it's tied up pretty nicely at the end. It kind of sets, in a way, it kind of sets up the some of the factions and the events that are present in episode 4. Um, and and I actually really like some of the characters. Like I said, this they introduce a new protagonist, Starkiller, who has been described as a 21st century Star Wars hero. And I really like this guy. He's played by a guy named Sam Witwer, whose likeness is also used for the character. And he's capable of being really intense and kind of intimidating, but also really knowing how to do these how to do these kind of emotionally dramatic moments. So I like the hero. I like the hero way more than Anakin Skywalker, and just off the top of my head, he's probably one of the better protagonists of the Star Wars franchise. Now that I think about it, um, just going by the main protagonist, because Luke Skywalker is likable, but this guy actually has an intensity about him. So, so that was kind of an interesting change of pace. It's basically what Anakin Skywalker should have been. So I like this guy. I like the female protagonist that accompanies him. This pilot chick, this British pilot chick called Juno Eclipse. I just love these names. She's, I mean, she's basically this very sarcastic pilot who's who's kind of ascended through the ranks of the Imperial Navy, and she's granted the love story can does seem to come out of nowhere at times. I mean, it does seem rather forced. These guys, I don't want to say they completely lack chemistry, but I mean, the chemistry is not as strong as it should be. Um, Although some of the banter is kind of nice. Like, did Vader tell you that he killed our last pilot? She's like, no. And later she's like, how many pilots have you gone through before me? And just with the straightest face, he's like, 7. She's like, oh, good. So I actually laughed at some of the humor in the game, and I think some of that has to do with the fact that it's not written by George Lucas. So who else? Who else? Who else? Who else? Who else? There's a training droid that accompanies Starkiller. I mean he's basically this kind of shape shifting droid. He uses kind of this It never really explains fully, but from what you see, it's this droid uses this droid is called Proxy. He uses this kind of hologram technology to change his form, and he comes equipped with all these training programs. He can kind of replicate the moves of uh, of talented opponents like Obi-Wan Kenobi, um, which you see at the beginning of the game. He kind of jumps out of nowhere and attacks Starkiller with as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the gamer originally originally is supposed to think, oh my God, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's coming out of nowhere, but then it reveals that it's this training bot, and Starkiller's like, oh well, you threw me off with that one. You haven't used that one in years. So, and this droid, I actually kind of like the completely straight face that each one of these characters plays. The droid is like, once again, I've completely failed in my mission to kill you. I'm sorry I failed you again. So that was kind of cute. And this droid is not nearly as annoying as C-3PO and R2-D2. Because this droid can actually fight, and Proxy is not just there to provide comic relief. He is there to provide valuable info on targets. I mean, at one point Starkiller's like, Proxy, give me the target, and he kind of morphs into the Jedi that they're going after, and kind of lists off some credentials, like this Jedi was a prominent figure in the Clone Wars. He was not wiped out by Order 66 because he used his own militia. So yeah, so I'm liking these characters, and another character who's in hindsight probably my favorite in the game is General Coda, who's this very seasoned general. He's a Jedi. He's a Jedi Knight who like I said, escaped Order 66, and because he had access to his own private militia, so he didn't have any clones in his unit at the time where the clones wiped out the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith. So that's the reason he survived. And basically what he's been doing now is kind of attacking all these important Imperial targets and outposts, in the hopes of luring Darth Vader out so he can kill Darth Vader. And basically what happens is he and Starkiller form an unlikely alliance. And I just like this guy's personality. This guy is very grizzled. He can be grumpy. He actually seems like a very three-dimensional character, as opposed to a lot of the other Jedi Masters we've seen, who are just kind of these really boring monk type characters, very boring diplomatic type characters. This is a guy who's actually taking action. This is a guy who does have the potential to lose his temper, and you don't feel like he's inexperienced or unable to control his emotions. But after fighting a losing battle for almost 20 years, after all the other Jedis were wiped out, he does. I think he has some reason to be a little cranky. So yeah, that you have him, who is probably my favorite character, and then you have Darth Vader, who essentially, he's not the main bad guy, because the Emperor shows up later, and the Emperor is actually voiced by Sam Witwer, the voice of The Apprentice, who does probably the best impression of Ian McDiarmid from the movies I've ever seen, because good God, he does a fantastic impression of the Emperor. For the longest time, I didn't even know it was him until I looked on the credits and I'm like, oh my God, it's the same guy. Wow. Kudos there. But Darth Vader, he's not voiced by James Earl Jones. He's voiced by Chad Vader, which, I don't know. I mean, okay, Chad Vader is not bad as Darth Vader, but you can just tell that he is putting forth an effort to do that voice. He is putting forth an effort to kind of make his voice sound intimidating and sharp and deep. And he's just not quite as natural as James Earl Jones, but it doesn't really take you out of any of the scenes. You're not like, oh my God, the guy playing Darth Vader sounds nothing like James Earl Jones. He absolutely sucks. No, it's not like that. It's just a little thing you notice, but after a while you get used to it, and you can genuinely believe, okay, yeah, this guy is Darth Vader. All right, so I like the story, I like the characters, and the graphics, especially for 2008, are pretty advanced. I mean, they're pretty detailed. They, I mean, I'm guessing it was no mistake that that they decided to go with this very short kind of buzz cut for the apprentice, because they didn't want to have to go through the hassle of having his of coding physics for his hair as he's running around. So they just gave him this really short buzz cut so his hair never moves. But with that said, the buzz cut looks pretty good. I mean, it looks pretty detailed, as does a lot of the other stuff in the game. I mean, a lot of the textures do actually have the appropriate amount of texture to them, and there are even some shots where you see a character close up and there are a few specks of dirt on his or her face. Good job there. I like that attention to detail. And appropriately enough, the Imperial environments have this really chrome metallic texture to them, or lack of texture. That's really reminiscent of the original trilogy. So there is that little bit of nostalgia and that welcome bit of familiarity, because you are essentially walking around some of the same environments that you saw in the original Star Wars movies, and some of the new environments like this trash planet that you go to. It's not really that pleasing to look at, but again, the attention to detail is pretty commendable. As is the jungle planet, where you track down this Jedi called Shaak Ti, who's actually voiced by Susan Eisenberg, the Wonder Woman from Justice League. So that was kind of cool just from a fan perspective, because I really love that show, and to hear that voice coming out of a Star Wars character, I'm like, yay! But yeah, the graphics are good, the characters are good, the story is good, but where the game really falls apart is the gameplay, oddly enough. Because the gameplay gets really repetitive after a while. Basically what it boils down to is that you are fighting basically these same types of enemies over and over and over again, and the stages go on for a long time. I mean, these stages, I will give them points for the length and the relative variety of the stages, because no two rooms in a stage look the same. But the thing is, the enemies you were either fighting about halfway through the game. You've seen every single enemy the game can throw at you, and the combat is not really all that fun. The combat really just boils down to button mashing. A bunch of different moves are made available to you, but you will essentially pick one technique or one type of combination and just keep doing that combination all throughout the game, because there's not really any penalty for doing so. I mean, there's not really any incentive. If you're just fighting regular infantrymen, like just regular stormtroopers without any kind of modifications to them, then there's really no point to doing anything other than just hitting the square repeatedly and just killing them. And if you're fighting these kind of Iron Man style troopers, which are, I mean, they're basically stormtroopers, but they're in these 10-foot tall mech suits. There's really basically what you can do in those fights is either just pummel them with force lightning, and then wait for your force meter to replenish very quickly. By the way, I mean you basically never run out of force energy, even if you keep spamming the force, because your force meter, if it runs out, then it just fills right back up within a few seconds. But yeah, you can either spam force lightning on bigger enemies, which is probably what you will end up doing. I mean, you'll just keep shooting force lightning, and or you will use the one or two attacks that are easiest to use when infusing your lightsaber with Force Lightning. You will do some regular square attacks, and then you will do a triangle attack to kind of do a downward slash with your saber, while your saber is kind of surrounded by Force Lightning. And it will basically boil down to that for the entire game, and a lot of the times you don't really feel as powerful as you should, considering the game is called The Force Unleashed. Because when you're tackling the regular stormtroopers, you just feel like an ordinary guy just hacking away at stormtroopers. There's really no incentive. Like I said, there's really no incentive to kill them any other way. You can pick them up and throw them across the room, but why would you do that when you can just hit square over and over again? And when you're attacking some of the bigger enemies, there's really not much reason to do anything else that other than like I said, stick to the techniques that you've been developing over the game. If you spam Force Lightning, chances are then that you're not going to change that strategy. You are basically going to be able to go through the entire game using a very limited number of moves, and you know what? For a game that supposedly gives you this very huge move palette, and all these force powers that you can use, to not make, I don't want to say force you to use them, because you don't want to have the game force you into using them, but no pun intended there. But really, the example I can point to is the Batman Arkham games, where as you leveled up, you can unlock these different either combat moves. You could increase your health. You could unlock these new gadgets, and each of the gadgets and each of the combat moves came into play. I mean, toward the beginning of the game, if you came across a guy with a shield, you would basically have to do that thing where you stun him with your cape and then jump on top of him. But later, you came across these very useful techniques where you could push. I'm just going by the PS3 version here. You could push square and triangle at the same time after building up a combo, and break the shield so they can't use it anymore. And you would want to use those techniques because they were all fun, they were all varied, they genuinely helped you in combat. And here, none of the force powers really make that much of a difference in comparison to each other. I mean, you won't come across you won't really be motivated to work towards a specific move because it will make combat a lot easier. I mean combat is already fairly easy, and if it's not, basically the only times when it's not easy is when the game is being really cheap, and having these guys snipe you, or having a barrage of enemies that you cannot possibly tackle all at once, which kind of defeats the purpose of the Force Unleashed. And also the game kind of lacks modes outside of story mode. There's not really much incentive to play the game anymore once you've completed the story, which is actually why, if you want to pick this game up, I recommend buying the PSP version. I never thought I would say that. Go for the PSP version of a game over the PS3 version of the game. And the reason I say that is because not only does it feel more fluid, because on the console versions the jumping really does feel stiff. I mean, you don't really feel as powerful as you as you should. But on the PSP version, you both feel more powerful. The jumping actually feels more, like I said, more fluid, more natural. Because here's what jumping amounts to in the console version. You kind of run, and then whenever you jump, it seems like he pauses for a microsecond. He stops in place and then jumps. But on the PSP version, if you are running and want to get a running jump, you can get a running jump because he kind of runs and then he jumps. So I like the way it plays better on the PSP version, even though there is the glaring problem of essentially being able to run through most of the level some of the time. Some of the levels in the PSP version you can actually just run through if you don't die. Granted, you wouldn't necessarily want to do that, but yeah. Oh, and also the force powers feel easier to use on the PSP version. I don't know what it is about the console version, but just the way they got the physics engine working and they got the targetings. I mean, there is no targeting system. Like you turned off your targeting computer. Turns out that wasn't a good idea for the game because whenever you pick up an object to throw at an enemy, half the time you'll miss. Whereas in the PSP version, at least this was the case for me. I basically always hit my target when I was using the force to throw something at them. Yeah. Oh, and again, another thing that makes the PSP version better, in my opinion, is there is actually stuff to do outside of story mode because there's what is called historic mode, or these historic missions, and basically what it boils down to is you can use the very over-the-top force powers and all these different skills you've accumulated in the story mode, and basically apply them to scenarios from the movies. I'll explain. There are 5 historic missions. There's the gladiatorial combat scene from Attack of the Clones. In the desert arena thing. There's the fight with Christopher Lee from Revenge of the Sith. At the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, there's the 30-minute-long boring lava planet action scene from the end of Revenge of the Sith. There's the Luke versus Darth Vader fight from Empire Strikes Back, and there is the fight over the desert Sarlacc pit from Return of the Jedi, where you basically play as Luke Skywalker and you're fighting a bunch of Jabba's thugs, and eventually you fight Boba Fett. And basically, what makes these feel unique and feel honestly pretty fun is the fact that you get to play as these heroes from the movies. Like, you get to play as Samuel Jackson, you get to play as Anakin Skywalker, you get to play as Obi-Wan Kenobi, you get to play as all these heroes. But the thing is, you can do whatever technique or whatever force power you've gained in the story. So if you want to, you could have Samuel Jackson shoot lightning at Jango Fett. You can have Obi-Wan Kenobi throw his lightsaber. You can have Darth Vader. You can have Darth Vader constantly. You can have Darth Vader kind of do that thing you see in all the trailers where he kind of builds up a lot of force energy and then kind of lets it off in just this spherical blast. So I really like those historic missions, and another mode that kind of adds some interesting novelty to the game is I think Force Duel mode, where you basically pick a character and go up against all these different opponents, and I think there are 12 matches. I think so. And as you progress, you start having to go against 2 opponents, and then eventually 3 opponents toward the end. And again, that's I like the way the lightsaber duels play out in the PSP version better too, because they actually feel like actual like actual fights. The thing with the boss battles, specifically the lightsaber duels in the console version of the game, is because they are staged. They're completely staged. They're completely scripted because you very rarely actually engage them in an actual sword fight. I mean, basically the boss. Say you're fighting Darth Vader near the end. You're fighting Darth Vader. What he does is he jumps to a platform that you cannot reach for whatever reason, and he starts throwing stuff at you, and basically all you can do is avoid the stuff he throws at you, and then either toss stuff at him or just shoot force lightning at him. And stuff like that really does kind of break whatever fluidity you were going for with the combat and how these opponents engage each other. Whereas in the PSP version, that happens very rarely, if ever. Basically in the PSP version, from beginning to end, you were just engaging them in direct sword fighting. Yeah, it can essentially boil down to button mashing at times, but it keeps it varied, it keeps it fluid. It actually, like I said, it feels like a real sword fight. You can block and defend. The opponent does not jump to an unreachable spot like a little sissy and just throw stuff at you, and you aren't limited in what you can attack with. Yeah. And in addition to the Force duels on the PSP version, there's basically survival mode, which is your standard like not last man standing. It's this never-ending barrage of enemies, and once you survive against all of them, it's not easy. But once you survive against all the enemies, I think you unlock Darth Maul as a playable character. So yeah, it's I recommend the PSP version. And this game, at least the console version anyway, was a big disappointment in terms of gameplay. Like I said, everything else about the game is fairly solid. The acting is solid. The story is solid. The writing is decent. The graphics are very, very good. But the thing is, none of that matters when the gameplay is painfully average and repetitive. It just really took this potentially cool concept and just made it very tame. And is that really what you wanted to see from a game that's marketing itself as the best representation of all that this mystical energy field can do? Go for the PSP version of the game any day. I mean, really the only advantage that the console version has over the PSP version is the graphics are better.